It's May 25th, 2023, and this is the weekly Backdrop Developers meeting. We get together every week to talk about development priorities for the Backdrop project. My name is Nate Lampton. I'm QuickSketch on the internet, calling in from Oakland, California. We've got kind of the usual crowd here, but we'll do some introductions of everybody that has joined the meeting. We'll start with Luke, and then we'll go to Tim.
I am Luke McCormick, sell ear on various forums in San Ramon, California. Usually doing web project management, but I've actually started doing a little bit more PHP development these days, and there's a couple of things I'm going to take a shot at.
Yeah, I'm Tim Erickson. I'm St. Paul Tim. I'm in Deerwood, Minnesota, and yeah, that's it. Who's next?
Great. Let's go to Greg and then Jen.
I am Greg, usually in Australia, but now joining from Greece. Generally interested in helping in any way that I can. Yeah, thanks.
And Jen?
Jen, joining from Oakland, California.
Oh, all right. All right, let's see. So do we have any contrib updates, Jen, that should be mentioned?
There were 2 new showcases since the last time I checked. So 2 new people posted about their backdrop sites. One of them was a Drupal 7 conversion, so that's kind of interesting.
Okay, and where are those posted?
They're backdropcms.org/showcase.
Great. Okay. Let's see, issues for today. We didn't have any weekly posts in the forum for particular topics to cover, although Greg brought a couple for today. The first of which is issue 5927, which is updating Backdrop to be PHP 8.2 compatible. I think that there's still a couple little edge things in 8.1 too that there's also issues for. But 8.2 looks like this has been making some progress. Greg, can you kind of give us the rundown of what 8.2 generally requires?
I haven't touched that in quite a few months, and the trigger for it was that I wanted to experiment with it, and Backdrop wouldn't even be installed in PHP 8.2. The point where I got it is the installation finishes. I'm not sure. There must be errors or whatever, or to the point where there's no errors and the installation finishes, but there's failures in the tests, of course. So that's where I got it up to.
Okay, great. It looks like, I'm just guessing that looking at this pull request, it looks like you may have tried to fix a lot of code syntax things as well. Is that true? Do you think that
I don't remember, but maybe yeah. maybe because we have PHP-CS and was complaining as well. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I bet that a lot of that is involved here, but a lot of these changes also look really good, where there's just a lot of variables that are getting scoped properly, like properties and objects that they weren't explicitly defined, and they're all getting defined now. It's like this thing is a protected variable, this thing is a public variable, and you're doing that consistently, which honestly is a great thing to be doing anyway, but it does make reviewing this a little trickier. Yeah, it looks like PHP has a new allow dynamic properties. I'm not a big fan of these secret comments that PHP is starting to create all over the place.
Yeah. Look, unless we move to a spot where we just support the higher versions of PHP, which won't be until 2.0, I don't think that there's an easy way out of this. And yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, allow dynamic properties. Oh, wow. I just realized what this means is, so when we have an object and you just give it a thing, like say the node object, for example, node arrow NID, for example, we need to define NID as being a property, whether it's protected or public at the object level. And if you don't, then it throws an error that hey, you put something on this prop or on this object that wasn't specified in scope.
Explicitly, yeah.
Yeah, and that explains why you went through the tests and scoped all of the variables everywhere, because that made it so that you didn't have to add the allowed dynamic properties attribute on that class, because then it had all of its properties defined. That makes a lot of sense. But also, this is kind of a potentially large headache for us, because there are some places, and this actually could just lead to a larger like refactoring things. Comment module is my #1 pet peeve about this, that comment module puts like comment count, I think is the property name, onto the node object.
And stuff like last comment timestamp and
Last
stuff.
comment, yeah, other things that are dynamic properties that are changing constantly. And when the node cache is turned on, the the value of the number of comments and the last comment time gets saved into the node cache. And then when comment module pulls that information back out, it like can end up using that cached information. It really shouldn't ever be putting stuff directly on the node object. It should instead be a function that's like comment get node count, right? Or node or comment get comment count or something like that, that gets that value every time you need it. Because the way it was working in the past was that it was assuming there wasn't a cache on node load. It was always doing that every time on every node load, and a lot of times you didn't even end up displaying that information. So so it was like it was getting it too early, putting it in a place where it could end up getting cached, and then it might not even need it in the first place. So it was doing everything wrong, is doing everything wrong actually. But this really gets us into that same problem space, and that this prevents that from happening in the future.
Yeah, as I said, it's been quite a few months back now, and I remember that I started off by anything that was available in D7, and then I remember doing a lot of work on top of that. So some of the changes there are basically cross-ports from D7.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, great. This looks yeah, it looks like a really good start to things. Let's see how many things break.
Yeah, unless, and I don't see how this can become smaller unless we chunk it. But yeah, I don't know.
No, now that I understand the scope of it, I understand exactly what's going on here. And it's 151 files, which is a lot, but at the same time, it's like the same thing, every single one of them, just defining and scoping properties. So that's fine. I read through the whole thing just while I was sitting here, so it's not overwhelming.
Yeah, but it still needs quite a little bit of work.
Yeah, it does look that way. Okay, well, great. That looks great. So that issue is 5927. Definitely a good one to start taking a look at. Not particularly challenging to fix, it looks like, but we do need to do some work to go through and get all of those, every last one of them, identified. Great. All right, I wanted to talk a little bit about issue 5913, which is turning on entity reference on new installations. This was one thing that surprised me. I set up a sandbox of 125, which just came out last month. Which just came out this month? Is that really last week? Wow. It's been a long month. So, yeah, so entity reference wasn't turned on by default, though, which just surprised me, because it's now been 2 releases that we have entity reference in core, and I've been using it on my projects, but I was surprised that setting up my site, I had to turn it on first. So I think, yeah, this is a question about like what blocking issues do we potentially have on this, if anything. Looks like Jen just posted a comment. So you want to verbalize that, Jen?
Yeah, so I was under the impression that what decided whether a module was enabled or not in core was the likelihood for sites to actually use the feature. And in general, I feel like it's a really bad idea if we have a whole bunch of modules on that aren't being used. And so, like for most of my websites, I'll go through and like disable core modules like comment and stuff if there's no comments on my website, just to sort of avoid problems from appearing or to make upgrades easier in the future. You know what you're actually using and what you're not. And reference module is like the least commonly used of the field modules in core, but I don't know of the sites that are using Backdrop, how many of them are using entity reference. Like maybe it will be worthwhile because there's a lot of people in that thread that seem to think we should turn it on. Maybe it will be worthwhile going through and saying like, of the sites that you have, of the Backdrop sites that you have, what are we looking at in terms of percentage of sites that are actually using reference? And if most of them are using it, then I would say we should turn it on. I know for me personally, most of my sites aren't using reference, but I have a handful that are using whatever was before references or whatever the previous version. And so I will count those as though they're using reference. But that might give us a more accurate feeling of whether, like what, because I know that for more complicated sites, it's going to be more common that they're using it. But those are also people more likely to know how to turn on a module. So I don't know.
So we have telemetry here as a possibility. For a minute, I was thinking, well, that doesn't help us if it's turned on automatically, which it doesn't help us if it's turned on automatically. But if it's turned off by default, then we could use telemetry to find out how many people are actually turning it on.
Yeah.
And we could figure out if it's a big enough percentage to warrant it. And maybe we could do that with a couple of modules. That data is not really that useful if the module is turned on by default, but it is very useful if it's turned off by default.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we don't currently track module enabled disabled status in telemetry, so we'd have to get that
Right.
change in to the next
Yes.
126, and then we would have to slate this issue for 127 based on the data.
Yeah, I can here's some funny number munging for you is that of versions of so if we just take the total number of all Backdrop websites, which is about 2,500, but then we subtract out ones that include entity reference, which is 124 and 125, that is almost let's see, that's 1,000, that's 1,500 of them are on a version that includes entity reference out of the box already. So that leaves only about 1,000 websites that are running an older version of Backdrop, and of those 1,000 websites, there are 1,040 installs of entity reference, or sorry, 140 installs. So that means that more than 10% of Backdrop websites were installing entity reference manually. And so that's already that's pretty compelling in itself. It's not quite 20%, which is
Well, I
where
would
we
hope
normally
for
would target.
50% before we turn it on in core.
Really? Even though like 10, let's say 10, or let's say that's only the older websites. But if we could say like even 20% of sites were
But now you're
using
making
it.
80% of people disable a module that they might not even know they don't need.
No.
Well, I mean,
I probably wouldn't disable it.
yeah, like what's the amount of harm that it's causing? Like, are people disabling date module when they don't have any date fields? Like, that's on by default too.
I mean, I guess maybe the harm of the module, it would weigh into that. But I know like something like comment, I never leave on, or like color or whatever, because they interfere with everything else.
Mhm.
With reference, all you're getting is like extra views you're not using, and
Well, you're not getting anything other than adding additional field types. Like, unless you've added an entity reference field, it's not going to impact the views interface because there's no fields of that type.
but there's a view that's like your reference, like that shows up in the widget for your referencing, right? There's like a views handler, so like you can choose what type of view it is. It's like whether it's what is that called? Like a type of view, like a block, but it's called a reference. What is that thing?
I'm on Team Jen here. I think you need to constantly fight against incrementally increasing complexity. That simplicity is really hard to achieve, and you have to be like push against things that add more knobs and controls and buttons to interfaces that people don't understand.
I mean, I think if it was something more like date or email, I would be less concerned about it. But because it adds a bunch of other stuff all over the UI that isn't the field, that's where I get concerned. And especially in views, like views is super confusing for people.
Yet we have it enabled by default. Just playing the devil's advocate here.
Right, but I'm saying we have views enabled because more than 80% of sites are going to have a view, right? But we don't need to overcomplicate the views interface for all of those sites if only 10% of people are going to be using reference.
Is our goal to eventually replace the term reference thing that we have with references?
Yeah.
So
It also would make it really confusing while we still have both, because you can have an entity reference to a term and you can have a term reference. And that could be really confusing for people if they have one in one place and another in another place and don't understand the difference. I was personally thinking that we wouldn't enable entity reference in core until it replaced term reference. And if it does replace term reference, then it would probably be used by 80% of sites running Backdrop, because most people use taxonomy, or I don't know, maybe I think they do.
Yeah, well, you need it.
Right?
You need it even for the standard profile for
Right.
posts because they have tags.
Right.
Yeah. Well,
should we start collecting telemetry on those things, on those couple of things that we just mentioned?
Yeah.
Well, I think actually, if this is a sticking point, we should turn on telemetry on entity reference and just see like is it being turned on?
Oh, interesting. On the contrib module.
No, on
It's in core.
on the core module. Is entity reference turned on? Because now we don't, other than the
But
contrib
why-
module, we can no longer have usage information for individual modules, which is a whole issue by itself. Also, like, should we collect the modules
Yeah.
that are turned on?
Yeah.
And I think that's another way we could achieve this if we wanted to not audit all modules that are turned on, because we already have usage information to rate contrib modules, but granularly say
modules.
what core modules are turned
Yeah.
on, because that
Right.
also
So you wanna
limits
do that-
privacy concerns.
You want to do that by module and not just give me a list of core modules. What's the like we have like an issue
have
that's
an
like
issue for
track core
we have-
modules, but I don't know technically what that is. Is it we send like a yes no for every module, or
Yeah, the way telemetry is set up right now, we'd need to say yes, no for every module.
Interesting.
And maybe we don't do that. Maybe it's not like literally every module, because
we don't need to know about node?
100% of sites are going to have node
Yes.
module turned on. Yeah,
Right.
exactly. So
Interesting.
so
Okay, I would
maybe,
love this.
maybe we should
We
do that
have-
only for the modules that we're thinking about toggling the state on.
Interesting.
And can I
Yeah,
clarify
so-
something? Because Jen mentioned that we'd have to do this in 1.26, but I think you've talked, Nate, in the past about adding telemetry and bug fix modules, or maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah. It sounds like a task.
Yeah, I also
think
think like if all we're doing is doing reference module, that's a much smaller lift than like create a system in telemetry that allows us to track core module data, which I think would need tests, and that would have to go into a new feature milestone. But if we're just sending one piece of data about reference, and then that might also set a precedent for how we do other modules in the future, and it wouldn't be a whole new system for core modules. It would just be another data point for each one, and those could probably all go into bug fix releases.
we have an issue for that, by the way, by yours truly. So the issue is 5185. And my last comment there was that here's a thought. If you exclude all the test modules and all the hidden required modules, Core currently has 8 disabled and 37 enabled modules by default in the standard installation file.
So maybe this first one could be like add telemetry for all disabled core modules, because that's
Right.
only 8.
Right.
And that would help us know if we need to turn on any of them or not. And then we could have a follow-up that would be like, of the enabled core modules, which ones do we want?
How many are disabled? Yeah.
Yeah. But not all of them, right? We don't care about node, but like we could have an issue where we discuss that specifically, and that would make it really easy to have this one be a discrete issue that would get us exactly what we need to answer the next question.
Yep.
Gosh, the number, yeah, I was thinking about how valuable this would be. There's so many, I mean, Greg's been, touting the value telemetry for ages, but just thinking about how we could track how many multilingual websites there are would just be amazing. Yeah. Yeah, and how many people turn off color module? That would be fascinating to learn. Yeah, a lot of these things. I think that the people turning off modules would be even more incredible than people turning them on, because turning them
Yeah.
on is easy.
Sure, except that I doubt there's very many people who do that. So
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
think
maybe
the number of people who
Drupal-
actually turn off modules, I think, are pretty low. So it may not turn out. It would only be interesting if there were, suddenly for one module, like 5% of the people turned it off. Like that would be like, wow.
Right.
Okay.
That's what
Color
I think.
module.
That's what I think will happen with or comment module. I think a lot of people turn off comment module
Yeah.
because
I don't. It could be.
it could be. Yeah, I don't think so, but it could be.
Yeah, as someone who
Right.
doesn't turn off modules, I assume that nobody else does, but I could be wrong.
At some
I
point,
feel
I'm
like
not-
my constant need to turn them off comes from my like constant experience with having to upgrade a site and spending so much time figuring out, is this thing even being used or not, before you start, in order to like control the scope of the work for the upgrade. And I think I've done that so many times, starting from Drupal 4, what have you,
Sure.
that now I'm just like, if you're not using it, get it off, so you never have to worry about it in the future.
yeah, and I think now that I recall, some, what was it called, Minicore something. I'm going to use the word fanatics. So people that were saying, oh, you should always start with the minimal profile and then start enabling, which sounds good in theory, right? But if you have people that are inexperienced, that's going to be hell, right?
Yeah.
And what we have been saying is, in Backdrop, we're going to be making it easier out of the box, right? And I'm so thankful that we actually have telemetry to show that, how many people are using the minimal profile. So, and it is currently at none, 0%.
Okay. Posting a comment to the issue. Okay.
Having said that, I should be fair that we made it harder to discover that there's a minimal profile in Backdrop, right? We hide it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, we sure did.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't miss that. But
I
that's
don't.
my opinion. Yeah.
Yeah. It's one of the early issues that we had, one 2-digit numbers or 3-digit numbers, where we said simplify the installation process, and that was one step that was taken out, and I'm very grateful for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One thing I really appreciate is the removal of the email address, the duplicate email address. Like, what's your email address? What's the site email address? Especially as Jen pointed out way back when, that we auto-populate, Drupal auto-populates the second field with a value that you shouldn't use, and that's just totally wrong. Okay, all right, let's move on to the next issue. jQuery 3, issue 3106. So this is an issue where we would like to include jQuery 3 out of the box and have it be enabled by default for new sites. And for existing sites, we end up with the equivalent, actually on all sites, we end up with the equivalent of jQuery Upgrade, where it lets you toggle between jQuery 1 and jQuery 3. And then we continue updating jQuery 3 to the latest version. jQuery 1 is end of life and is no longer getting any more updates, so we'll never need to, hopefully, never need to update jQuery 1.x in any way again. But yeah, the driver for this is that more automated tools are becoming available. Like Google Lighthouse has a security scan, and GitHub has a security scan, that when you make a commit onto a project, like if somebody's pushing up a Backdrop project to their repository, GitHub is now alerting people that there's a security vulnerability in your installation of Backdrop, because it scans for common old files like jQuery and it identifies that as being a security risk. GitHub doesn't know that we've patched our version of jQuery and it's not actually a security risk, but it just blanket says if this is jQuery 1, then it is a security vulnerability. And the same thing happens with Google Lighthouse, that if you look at any Backdrop website, Lighthouse flags all Backdrop websites as having a security vulnerability in them because of our old version of jQuery. So it's a concern that we could avoid, if we get people up to date on the new version. But because there's API breaks, we can't just wholesale upgrade from 1 to 3.
That Herb asked the question, isn't GitHub and Lighthouse still going to detect the old version, even if we've added the new version, and even if people aren't using the old version?
Oh, that's an unfortunate thought. Lighthouse won't, because Lighthouse checks what's being rendered on the page, but GitHub might still do that.
Right.
That's interesting. I wonder how GitHub is doing the matching, because one thing that we're planning on doing is jQuery.js, where it exists in core right now, will be replaced with the 3.x version, and then the 1.x version will be moved to a new location with its version string attached to it. And so we might also, just look into how to suppress that. I wonder if we modified the file in some way, if that would make it so that the hash matching or whatever GitHub is using to identify its version wouldn't pick it up. But that's a really good point about GitHub.
Yeah.
But we'll need to look more into that. I'm also not 100% certain that happens for everybody, or if that's just what core committers see when they push up Backdrop projects. Because it's possible that I don't know actually what that behavior is.
Okay.
Well, anyway, multiple reasons to get that moving. We mentioned this last time too, that we're at the start of the 126 release. The sooner that gets in, the better, because then we can have a whole cycle with the new version of jQuery on all of the test profiles, and while people are testing the sandboxes, and that would give us time to work out any issues with front-end JavaScript. Okay, those 3 items are the only items I had on the docket for today. Do you guys have any other items?
Well, it's a good time to think about just anything that we might want to get in the next release, and something that we've all been talking about for a long time, and I'm just wondering what it would take to get it done, is the automatic updates. If I advocated for that, I can't solve it myself. But do you think if we just sort of keep it on our radar, can we get? Maybe I just need to float around and see if anyone with the chops to do it has the time.
So yeah, I think there.
You talked. I mean, you did talk recently, Nate, about that it isn't dependent on you. I think you've said, but we need somebody with some skills.
Yeah. What I think the best thing to do here is we should audit the automatic updates module for Drupal 7,
right,
and see how much of that approach we want to adapt, because they pretty much fully figured out this entire problem and had it ready to go before they were like, okay, now we can't use it for Drupal 8 and higher because it's totally different. But my impression is that they really got it to a very good place, and it was fully functional and did the job before they stopped working on it and just said, okay, that was nice, but now it's not actually usable.
The reason I'm thinking about it is the recent discussions about end of life, and also, hearing some people say that they go to WordPress from Drupal because they don't need a developer to do updates. And I probably would never use automatic updates, right? That's not in our workflow, and that may be the reason it never happens. Is anybody who's doing core development doesn't need automatic updates. But is it, if I don't even know, I mean, I don't use, we do all of our core and contrib modules just using, downloading and committing. And if I were a beginner on GoDaddy that had a backdrop site, right now I can't, I have to at least, is there, so where are we? What is the current status of automatic? Can I download the core update onto GoDaddy without doing an FTP or?
Yep. Right now, you can self-update core through the user interface, and you can self-update all
Okay,
contrib modules.
it's just
through the
not
user
automatic.
interface. It's just not automatic.
Oh,
Correct.
yeah.
And
So maybe this is less urgent.
the key thing about it is that right now there's no mechanism to execute update.php in an automated fashion. So all the code already exists to download, update, replace code in place, but then there's no automated mechanism to run update.php, which of course there is. The B command line tool has a way to run it from the command line, but we need a way to do that in an automated fashion. So what the Drupal automatic updates module includes, and something that we don't have, is that you can't execute update.php from the command line right now. There's not a shell script equivalent other than using B or Drush. And so we need a shell script that executes update.php, like we have run tests for example, that we can run tests from the command line or the user interface. But update.php for some reason still doesn't have a command line equivalent other than B or Drush. And so we need a CLI version of that so that the web request, what it can do is execute all of the replacements of all the codes, all the code directories, and then it should execute via the PHP pass-through function, which runs a command on the server. It should execute the updates.php or updates.sh executable to actually apply the updates. So that's the part that's missing, is running update.php.
Got it.
And the Drupal module does this, so it could fill in that gap of what we're missing right now.
Great. From if I'm just a site builder only and I want to do this, the other part is the backup part, right? So I can push the buttons, but I need to do a backup. And I can do a backup, but I have to install backup and migrate. But we've talked about adding that into core so that you could, as part of the update process, at least back up your database before you. Maybe that's a more important thing, would be to just get that functionality in core and ability to sort of do a backup, so that you can run update PHP without worrying about screwing up your site.
Mm-hmm.
I'll think more about that but as long as if users can do the entire upgrade process just through the UI, the automatic part is nice, but I don't know how important it is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because the automatic part, its value is that it may happen that someday we end up with the Drupal Get-in 3.0 that comes along, and the more sites that are running automatic updates, the fewer sites will be subject to an attack like that, because they will have just gotten updated by themselves.
Right.
And I think the Drupal module, and this would take some work on our side, is that we may want options for only update Drupal core, because Drupal core is Backdrop core should be the safest thing to upgrade, because we're managing it. It's the most closely monitored. We know it has automated testing, as opposed to updating contrib modules, where contrib modules, it's a lot looser as to whether or not there's testing available or not.
There's
Um,
also less likelihood that everybody who's run the updated module is using the exact same scenario as you. And I know at least with modern versions of Drupal, there's a lot of times where you update a module and then everything's broken on your site, whereas that doesn't happen quite so often with core updates. So
Yep.
I think it'll protect people and let them do that.
Yep.
On their own.
Yeah, so I think that sort of option would definitely be desirable, because manual updates most of the time are fine, but yeah, core I think would be fantastic because it's also the largest code base and the one most likely for people to identify security issues in. Okay. Well, Tim, if you want to advocate for that, that would be awesome.
It's pointless if I can't get somebody that with the skills to do it. I can't do it. So.
I think you have more ability than you think. I think at the very least, auditing the Drupal version is something that almost anybody can do. If you have a Drupal site, just install the module and see what things are in it that seem like they would be useful to backdrop, and that would be a really great starting point.
Fair enough. Let's put a note to that effect in the issue. I'll do that now.
All right. Well, I think this is exciting. I really like the idea of telemetrizing the entity reference. It's not even a very large effort. I'm going to get some free space here, not this week, but the week afterwards. You know what? I guess is a highly topical thing is speaking of week after next is DrupalCon North America in Pittsburgh. I don't think that Jen or I are planning on being there. There's some other life happenings outside of things for us, but yeah, if there's any cohort of backdrop people that will be present there, it would be great if they could organize in some way to meet up.
My knowledge, Justin and Irina have both talked publicly about going to DrupalCon. I don't know if anybody else.
Justin's bringing buttons that
Yep.
I designed that I've never seen in real life. So.
Oh yeah, what are on the buttons?
The drop and the motto.
Nice.
Sorry, Nate, I phased out at some point, but I could hear that you were talking about jQuery, and I don't know, I can't remember, but the pull request was in a good state, and we sort of said in the previous dev meeting that we should try to get it in as soon as possible to catch any problems. So were you saying that the week after the other, you're going to have some capacity to just do some sort of code sprint with regards to these sort of issues?
I like it if you hold to me that would be great, actually, because things right now, it does look like I have space week after next. I have a combination of contracts coming to an end simultaneously, and then a lot of the company of Lullabot is going to be at DrupalCon, so that makes things really quiet. So yeah, there's a lot of potential there.
Okay, I'll remember to bring it up again next week then.
Yeah, do that. For the jQuery issue itself, what I see here as a problem is that this issue it provides the interface perfectly, I think, and it provides the swap. But what it doesn't do is there are known regressions, like known things that got removed from jQuery 3.x, and it doesn't address any of them. I think I put in here at one point, like, these are the regressions. A quick search I found for size and toggle in a few places. So we need to look through the list of functions that have been removed from jQuery 1.x and search through the code base and replace the really obvious things, like we're calling functions that don't exist anymore. And there's only like 6 removed functions, and I think we're only using 2 of them. So it's going to be a pretty simple thing, or I think there's only like a half dozen locations that need to be updated, where we just need to make sure we're not calling a function that literally doesn't exist anymore.
So what was the battle plan? That it's going to be for existing sites, we're just going to leave it up to 1.x and give people the option to manually upgrade it when they're ready, or test and do that. But for new sites, we're going to have 3.x enabled by default, or we're going to give people another cycle and then do it.
Now, just go straight into new sites, get 3.x, I think.
Right. 'Cause yeah, cool. Okay.
Yep, and that'll make it big. We also, I mean, we don't need it to be the default, but having it be the default on new sites right away makes it so that the tests and everything that we're doing for this cycle, actually, it's already turned on without any other
Cool.
work.
That's why I was actually asking.
Yep.
Cool.
Oh, I like these. Luke put a link to the Backdrop CMS store apparently on Cafe Press, which I did not know we had, but apparently it only has buttons at this point. But still, that's great.
Kind of a
think we've had
bootleg
it for-
store, really, since it's not like officially authorized or blessed or anything. So
The unofficial swag store. You know what we should start doing is where we reference Backdrop CMS. This is totally gonna open a can of worms. We only have 1 minute left, but we should
put a
start putting,
trademark.
we should put TM on it. It is trademarked. So we should start making sure that that's enforced in places that are obviously, you know, like swag related, you know. Even the website, actually, we should add down at the footer of it our trademark. But I know that's a little bit contentious because that's an in progress thing for moving the trademark to the Software Freedom Conservancy.
Is it? I thought they already have our word mark.
I don't know.
They did.
You guys would know better than
Oh,
I.
that's right. You're not in the PMC anymore. They renewed our word mark on our behalf, and we signed something saying, didn't you sign that? I'm pretty sure you signed the document too, saying that we were transferring it over to the Conservancy.
Yeah, I did, but I wasn't sure that actually went through.
Yeah.
So,
what
that's
we're working
great.
on now is getting the logo trademarked, that's what's taking a while. But the word mark they already have. So
Great.
we could
Yeah.
try and get some official language, like Backdrop CMS is trademarked by the Software Freedom Conservancy, or whatever that language should be. We could put that in our footer.
Great. I'm going to totally look up Backdrop CMS. Okay, well, maybe. I'll have to find the website. Okay, we're at 3:00. I've got to run. So thank you everybody for being here today. We've got some action items, and we'll catch people next week.
Bye.
Right.
Everyone.
See ya.
Hey,
Bye, everybody.
I